My parents laughed when my fiancée cheated, said I deserved it, so I cut contact forever. And now they regret everything they ever said. I'm a 30-year-old guy. And for most of my life, I've been the one trying to keep my family together. I grew up in a house where love always came with conditions. My parents weren't physically abusive or cruel in an obvious way. They were just a cold. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you question whether being good will ever be enough. Every report card, every job update, every small success. It was never about what I achieved, but how it compared to someone else. "Your cousin got promoted again?" my dad would say, flipping through the newspaper. "You should learn something from him." I used to think if I worked harder, smiled more, stayed quieter, they'd finally see me. I was the dependable one, the son who picked up groceries, handled their bills when money was tight, and stayed behind when others left home. I didn't drink, didn't fight, didn't rebel, but somehow, being good made me invisible. Even my mother, who'd once been soft-spoken, started picking me apart as I got older. "You dress like an old man," she'd say while folding my shirts. "You're 30 and still not married? What's wrong with you?" She'd laugh like it was a joke, but her eyes were sharp, waiting for a reaction. My father would smirk, adding he's too busy fixing everyone else's problems to fix his own. It hurt, every comment, every snide remark disguised as humor. But I swallowed it, telling myself this was what family was. Responsibility, endurance, maybe even love, if you squinted hard enough. And then, one night, when I'd almost accepted that this was my life, just surviving their judgment, I met her. The one person who looked at me like I wasn't a disappointment, the woman who made me believe I could finally be enough. I had no idea she'd become both my greatest comfort and my greatest heartbreak. Her name was Rachel. I met her at a friend's small get-together. It's a kind of awkward evening where everyone stands around pretending to enjoy the playlist while checking their phones. She laughed at something stupid I said, not out of pity, but because she actually found it funny. That moment cracked something open in me I didn't even know was frozen. She was warm, the kind of person who made eye contact like she was really listening. For someone like me used to being dismissed mid-sentence, it was disarming. We started talking regularly after that night. Late texts that turned into phone calls, and phone calls that turned into coffee dates. Rachel had this way of making ordinary moments feel like peace. Sitting in her old Toyota eating fries while it rained outside felt more like home than my actual house ever did. She'd listen when I talked about work, about how my parents always seemed disappointed. She never told me to get over it. She just understood. One night I told her, half joking, "You make me feel like I'm not broken." She smiled softly and said, "You were never broken. You were just never seen." No one had ever said something like that to me before. It was terrifying how easily I believed her. After a few months, I introduced Rachel to my parents. I thought they'd be proud that they'd finally see me happy and maybe happy for me. But the dinner was tense from the start. My mom's forced smile, my dad's short answers. The way they glanced at each other when Rachel spoke was like watching two people silently agree that she wasn't good enough that night. When Rachel asked in the car, "Did I do something wrong?" I lied. I said, "No, they just need time." But deep down, I already knew my parents weren't just skeptical. They were preparing for war. It started small, the jokes. My mom would say things like, "She talks a lot for someone who doesn't come from much," and my dad would chuckle, pretending it was harmless teasing. Rachel would smile politely, trying to play along, but I could see her hand tighten under the table. Every visit turned into a test, one Rachel didn't even know she was taking at family dinners. My mother would pick apart her every word. "Oh, you studied literature? That's nice. Not very practical, though," my dad would smirk, adding, "Well, at least she's pretty. That counts for something." They'd laugh, and I'd force a smile, pretending it didn't burn. When I tried to defend her, they'd turn it back on me. "You're so sensitive, just like her." One evening, after yet another awkward meal, Rachel finally broke. In the car, tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "They don't like me, do they?" I gripped the steering wheel, staring ahead. "They'll come around," I said, my voice too shaky to sound convincing. She looked at me like she wanted to believe it, like she wanted to believe I believed it. But the truth was, they weren't trying to understand her. They were trying to make her leave. They'd spent my whole life controlling me with guilt, and Rachel was the first person who didn't fit into their script. A week later, I overheard my mom on the phone with one of her friends. "He's obsessed with that girl," she said, laughing. "She's not his type. Too emotional, too needy. He'll see it soon." I stood there in the hallway, frozen, listening to the woman who raised me laugh about my happiness like it was a bad joke. That night, I didn't tell Rachel what I heard. I just held her tighter when she hugged me goodbye and silently wondered how long she'd be able to handle being loved by someone whose parents would never let him be free. A year and a half later, I proposed. It wasn't some grand gesture, no fireworks, no crowd. Just the two of us on the balcony of our tiny apartment, city lights flickering below. She cried when she said yes, her hands trembling, the ring catching the glow of a distant street lamp. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was winning at something. Like maybe love could drown out the noise of everything else. When I told my parents, their reaction was cold. My mom didn't even fake a smile. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice dipped in false concern. "Marriage is a big commitment, and you barely know her family." My father didn't say congratulations, just grunted. "You could do better." Invited them to dinner to celebrate, hoping face-to-face warmth might change things. Instead, my mother criticized the food Rachel cooked, said the plates were mismatched, and asked how we planned to afford a wedding on your salary. My dad leaned back in his chair, shaking his head like I'd made a foolish bet. When I tried to reason with them later, my mom snapped, "She's using you. You're too blind to see it." Then she added something that lodged itself in my chest. "If she really loved you, she'd tell you to make peace with us, not pull you away." That night, Rachel found me sitting in the dark. "What happened this time?" she whispered, touching my arm. I looked at her, the woman who made me feel like I finally mattered, and lied again. "Nothing. They're just old-fashioned." She gave me a tired smile, but I saw the pain behind it. We started planning the wedding alone. No parents, no approval, no family blessing. Just us two people building something fragile in the middle of a storm neither of us caused. I told myself love would be enough, but I should have known my parents weren't done destroying the good things in my life. After the engagement, life started to feel heavier, not because of wedding stress, but because of the quiet tension that never left. Rachel tried to stay cheerful, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. Every time my parents called, she'd stiffen. Every time I mentioned visiting them, she'd change the subject. I told myself it was temporary, that once we were married, things would settle. But instead, they only got worse. Rachel began working longer hours at her new job. Late-night emails turned into work dinners, and those dinners became overnights. I tried to be understanding. She was ambitious, and I didn't want to become the controlling boyfriend her parents warned her about. But sometimes she'd come home smelling of cologne that wasn't mine, with her hair still damp like she'd just showered elsewhere. I'd ask gently, "You've been busy lately. Everything okay?" She'd smile a little too quickly. "Yeah, just trying to prove myself." "You know how it is." I did, because proving yourself to people who doubt you was my whole life. My parents didn't make it easier. My mother would call just to say, "So, still together?" and laugh like she knew something I didn't. My dad joked. Maybe she realized what she signed up for. I stopped answering their calls, pretending I was too busy, but their voices still echoed in my head. One night, while Rachel was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the couch. I wasn't snooping, at least. That's what I told myself. But when I saw the preview of a message last night, was worth the risk. My chest went cold. I stared at the words until the screen went dark again. When she came out, a towel in her hair, she smiled and said, "What's wrong?" I swallowed the truth. "Nothing," I lied. Because after a lifetime of denial, I didn't know how to face betrayal. Not from the one person who made me believe love could finally be safe. A week later, my world cracked open. I got off work early. An unexpected power outage shut down the site, and for once, I was excited to surprise her. I picked up her favorite Thai takeout, humming the whole drive home. The building was quiet when I climbed the stairs. That peaceful kind of evening where everything feels right until it doesn't. As I unlocked the door, I heard it laughter. Hers. Soft, breathless. Followed by a low murmur I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped. The takeout slipped from my hand, spilling onto the floor, but I barely heard the thud. I walked toward the bedroom, every step heavier than the last. The door was half open. She was there. So was he a man from her office? Someone I'd met once at a company dinner? They froze when they saw me. The world didn't shatter loudly. It went silent, like the air had been sucked out of it. Rachel scrambled to cover herself, whispering my name like an apology, but I couldn't move. My hands hung uselessly at my sides. "Please, let me explain," she said, voice trembling. But there was nothing to explain. Everything I had ever feared about being unworthy. It's unlovable, it was all there, naked and breathing in front of me. I turned around and left. No shouting, no scene, no closure, just numb footsteps echoing down the hall. I drove 4 hours without direction, headlights slicing through the dark, tears blurring the road. I didn't even realize I'd ended up outside my parents' house until I saw the porch light flicker on. My mom opened the door, took one look at me and asked what happened. I told her that Rachel cheated, that I'd walked in on it. She stared at me for a moment, then laughed. "Guess you finally learned your lesson," she said, smiling cruelly. My father added, "Told you she wasn't your kind." That laughter, it hurt more than the betrayal itself. Because Rachel's cheating broke my heart, but my parents' reaction? That broke me. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in my car outside their house, staring at the dark windows until the sky began to turn pale gray. At some point, I went back inside, hoping maybe, just maybe, they'd realized how cruel they'd been. Instead, I walked into the kitchen to find my mom sipping coffee like nothing had happened. She looked up, almost amused. "Still here?" she said. "You should have known she wasn't serious about you." I felt my chest tighten. "Mom, I just found the woman I love with another man. Can you stop for 1 second and just be my mother?" The words came out cracked, raw. She sighed dramatically, like I was the one being unreasonable. "We tried to warn you. You never listen." My father didn't even look up from his phone. "You picked her over us," he muttered. "Now you deal with the consequences." I wanted to scream. To make them see how much it hurt, that instead of comfort, I got mockery. But every time I opened my mouth, the years of conditioning kicked in, that quiet voice that said, "Don't talk back, keep the peace." My parents had trained me well. Even in heartbreak, I couldn't defend myself. When I finally spoke, my voice was trembling. "I lost everything last night, and you're sitting here laughing about it." My mom put down her cup, smirking. "Oh, don't be dramatic. You didn't lose everything. You never had much to begin with." Something inside me went still. Not rage, not sadness. Just stillness. The kind you feel before everything changes. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and walked out without another word. As I stepped outside, I heard my father call after me, "You'll be back when you realize we're all you've got." I didn't turn around. I just kept walking. Because in that moment, I finally understood. I wasn't their son. I was just their scapegoat. And I was done playing that role. The days after that blurred together. I moved back into my apartment, but it didn't feel like home anymore. Just 4 walls echoing with silence. Rachel's things were still there. Her coffee mug, her hairbrush, the framed photo of us on the nightstand. I couldn't bring myself to throw them out. It felt like admitting it was really over. I stopped eating properly. Work became background noise. I'd sit at my desk staring at the same email for hours, pretending to function while my mind replayed everything. Rachel's laugh. My mom's smirk. My father's voice saying, "You'll be back." The words looped until I started believing them. Nights were worse. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to find a single memory that didn't hurt. There weren't any. Every corner of my life was stained with betrayal, by love, by blood, by everything I thought was safe. One night, I broke. I drove aimlessly through empty streets, until I ended up at the beach, the same one Rachel and I used to visit after work. The wind was sharp, the sand cold beneath my shoes, and for the first time, I let myself cry without restraint. Not quiet, restrained tears, but the kind that come from the gut, tearing you open. I remember whispering, "What did I do to deserve this?" To no one, half hoping the ocean would answer. But there was just the sound of waves, steady, indifferent, eternal. I thought about calling my parents, just to hear a voice. Then I remembered that laughter, that look of satisfaction when they realized I was broken, and I couldn't do it. That night, I understood what it meant to hit rock bottom. It wasn't some dramatic collapse. It was emptiness. No anger, no hope. Just a quiet understanding that no one was coming to save me, and yet, buried beneath that silence, something small began to shift. A thought. A decision. If no one was going to save me, then I'd have to learn how to save myself. I didn't plan to cut everyone off. It just happened. The calls stopped first, then the texts, then the habit of checking my phone, half expecting an apology that was never coming. The silence that once felt unbearable slowly became something else. I moved to a smaller apartment across town, somewhere no one knew me. I told my boss I needed time, started therapy, and for the first time in my life, I began unpacking everything I'd buried, not just Rachel, but decades of emotional bruises left by the people who were supposed to love me. Therapy wasn't easy. I remember telling my therapist I don't even know who I am outside of fixing people. She smiled gently and said, "Then maybe it's time you stop fixing and start feeling." It hit harder than I expected. I spent weeks learning to sit with my pain instead of running from it. Every day I walked to the park after sessions, headphones in, the world slowly regaining color. Work got better too. I focused on my craft again, and people noticed. For once, I wasn't working to prove myself, I was working because it made me proud. I started cooking again, sleeping through the night, even laughing without guilt. Months passed before Rachel reached out. A simple message: "I miss you. I made a mistake." My chest tightened, but instead of anger, I felt nothing. Just a quiet realization that I'd already grieved her. I didn't reply. I deleted her message and went for a walk. That night, sitting under the city lights, I realized something I never thought I would. Peace isn't loud or dramatic. It's choosing silence over chaos. It's walking away and not looking back. But peace, I would soon learn. It doesn't go unnoticed, especially by the people who once thrived on keeping me broken. Almost a year passed before I heard from them again. It started with a missed call from my mother, then another, then a voicemail. Her voice sounded different this time, smaller somehow. "We haven't heard from you in so long. Your father hasn't been well. Please call us back." I stared at my phone for a long time, thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to believe she'd changed. But another part remembered that night, her laughter echoing while I stood in pieces. I didn't call back. Instead, I listened to the silence that followed. Days later, my aunt reached out on Facebook, saying my parents were struggling, that my dad's health had declined, and they were finally realizing how cruel they'd been. She ended the message with, "They're miserable without you." I read it twice, not out of satisfaction, but disbelief. The people who once mocked my pain were now drowning in their own. Around that time, my father tried calling directly. His voice was weak, unfamiliar. "We just want to talk, son," he said. "Families fight, but we're still family." I almost laughed at the irony. For them, family had always meant control, not care. I hung up before he could finish. It wasn't revenge, it was self-preservation. I started hearing stories through relatives, how my mother had become isolated, how neighbors whispered about karma, how they'd lost friends after word spread about how they'd treated me. It should have made me happy, but it didn't. It just made me tired. For years, I begged for their love, thinking their approval defined my worth. But now, as I sat in my quiet apartment, sipping coffee with sunlight pouring through the window, I realized something I never had before. Their regret wasn't my redemption. It was just proof that walking away had finally worked. Still, some part of me knew the reckoning wasn't over yet. And when it came, it wouldn't be me begging for closure. It came in the form of a letter. Not an email, not a text, an actual handwritten letter sealed in a trembling script I hadn't seen since childhood. My mother's handwriting. It arrived one quiet morning, slipped under my apartment door, like some ghost from the past. I almost threw it out without reading it. But curiosity won. Inside were 4 pages of shaky apologies. She wrote about how they didn't know better, how they were only trying to protect me. She blamed my father's temper, her upbringing, their generation, everything except herself. The part that made me stop was near the end. We never wanted to lose you. Please come home. Your father isn't well, and we just want to be a family again. For a moment, I felt that old pull, the familiar ache of wanting to fix things. But then I remembered that night. The laughter. The way she smiled when I was breaking. How they treated my pain like entertainment. I folded the letter and sat there for a long time, staring at it on the table. Later that evening, I took it to the balcony. The sunset was bleeding orange and gold across the sky, the city humming softly below. I held the pages over the railing and whispered, "I forgive you, but I can't come back." Then I lit a match. The flames caught quickly, curling the edges until the words turned to ash, watching it burn. I didn't feel angry or triumphant. I just felt free, like I'd finally severed the invisible chain that had kept me tied to their approval all my life. For the first time, peace didn't feel like running away. It felt like standing still. And as the last of the ashes drifted into the wind, I realized forgiveness isn't about letting them back in. It's about finally letting yourself go. Years have passed since that letter burned to ash. And sometimes I still wonder if my parents ever truly understood what they lost. Not a perfect son, not some obedient reflection of their pride, but the only person who ever tried to love them unconditionally. I don't hate them anymore. Hatred is still a connection, and I've learned to live without those. What I have now is something far rarer, peace that doesn't depend on anyone else's permission. My life looks different now. I bought a small house on the edge of the city, quiet, surrounded by trees. I still work the same job, but it feels lighter now, like I'm doing it for me instead of trying to prove anything. I started volunteering at a local shelter on weekends. That's where I met Lily, a woman who didn't try to fix me or worship me, just saw me. We took things slow. For once, I wasn't rushing to fill an emptiness. I was learning to build something steady, something real. Sometimes she asks about my parents, about Rachel. I tell her enough to understand, but not enough to reopen the wounds. "Do you ever think you'll talk to them again?" she asked once, gently. I thought about it and said, I don't need to, because for the first time, I don't measure love by blood or history. I measure it by presence, by peace, by choice. Last week my aunt called, said my parents still ask about me. I told her to tell them I'm doing well. Not rich, not famous, not perfect, just happy. That's the one thing they never believed I'd be without them. Sometimes I stand on my porch at night, listening to the wind move through the trees, and I smile. They laughed when I lost everything. But I found something they never had, a life that isn't built on fear, control, or guilt. Just love. Just peace. Just me.